Something we do got to talk about that got a lot of news and obviously got big time react over. It's X now, right? It's not Twitter technically. I know everybody still calls it Twitter, but a bunch of people reacting on X and other social media platforms is this. I think it's called the hip drop tackle, the hip grab tackle. I'm not sure. Nonetheless, it's been banned. The impetus for this was the injury to
and just to lay the groundwork you're talking about, right? The NFL just had their coaches meeting,
correct,
right? An owners meeting,
right?
And
all
and
the
decided on
voted
a couple different
yep.
rules, changes, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
For the upcoming season. Go ahead.
That is 100% correct. Thank you for the prelude. Actually, very good there. So the hip drop tackle has been banned, okay? And I think the impetus for this was the injury to Mark Andrews earlier in the year, Baltimore. So if you watch the play, you see the linebacker, I think it's not Hendrickson, I forget his name, but the good linebacker on Cincinnati Bengals, I think he's number 55, comes from kind of like a weird angle across the field. Mark Andrews is somewhat kind of getting up the field, so he has to kind of tackle him from behind, like that kind of an angle. And he kind of just grabs onto the hip to grab onto something, pulls him down. You see Mark Andrews' notion. So that was the impetus for calling this meeting and outlawing the tackle. I want to hear your thoughts on it. What do you think?
You know, listen, it's hard to play defense in the NFL. You know, first of all, it's you know, they're big, they're fast. You know, I think my overall issue with it is that the offense does not have to stop and think. Right, they can play, 100%, 1,000%. Versus defensive players, you got to make sure you don't put their body weight on them. Now you got to make sure you don't do a hip tackle.
Don't ever lower your head.
Don't lower your head. Make sure you don't hit their head. Watch out for their knees. And that's more of a player thing, right? Like at the end of the day, if you ask any player, hit me in the head any day of the week, then my knees, right? You take out my knees, I'm done for my career. And so,
but that's what you're going to get now. I feel like with this.
It's tough, right? Because it's ambiguous, right? In the sense that if you tackle someone from the side, is it the hip or is it the?
If I go around your waist versus does my hand have to be on your hip pad?
What is that strike zone? Right, because that's what's difficult with the targeting rules now, where you can, there's defenseless player, there's targeting of the above the shoulders.
Yeah.
So there's so many, the strike zone for a tackle, a hit, has been limited, and now bringing down the players further been limited. I do get that they want to take so much out of the game, but it is not flag football, right?
I agree.
And I think, the only answer is, maybe quicker whistles, right, to protect the offensive player. And maybe every now and again, you're going to get a situation where, that person may have broken a tackle. But, if it's, if it's about protecting the player and you're going to change these rules, maybe start off by having a quicker whistle, right, to be able to, cut a play.
Sure,
and move
if it's a hairy-looking tackle, you don't like it, then maybe try to just, like you just said, blow the whistle. You're already doing it whenever quarterbacks get touched and it's multiple guys and they don't go down right away. So do it for other players then, too. That's ultimately what you're trying to get at.
Right, and think of it this way, right? Also, too, players fighting for extra yards a lot of times offensively get hurt. Right, because that defensive player is holding them up.
Sure.
Right, that defensive player is holding them up. Other guys are coming in, and they can take their head off. Right, and so the quick whistle, is my thought and solution to it. But the fact that they banned it is going to make it much harder.
Sure.
Now you can argue that they want more offensive touchdowns. You can argue that they don't want
what
as
a lot
much
of the sports
defense,
are going towards
right?
now. Yeah.
But
scoring
again, if they take away the aggression and the hitting and tackling out of football, and now it becomes flag football, that might cost them more.
It's a slippery slope.
Right? And so, look, the pressure's on the defensive player, and I think in this particular case, in so many cases, there has to be some pressure on the offensive player.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have the horse collar
That's
tackle,
gone.
right? There's also that ties in with dreads and hair.
Yeah.
And now with hips. All right, so think about it. You got to make sure you don't grab them too much by the in the upper shoulder. Now you got to make sure you don't grab them around the waist.
Sure.
Right. And think about it. If you tackle them forward, they could drag you. Right. And now you're losing your job.
Yeah.
Right. Because you didn't make an effective tackle.
And when you make a player more hesitant, like you make that's where injuries are usually more likely to occur, when people are hesitant and not quite sure what to do. And shout out to actually a podcast that I follow quite often, 3 and Outs, John Middlecoff. He was a former NFL scout. He works on in conjunction with Colin Cowherd with his new network, The Volume. It's fantastic. But he said something that I was listening to him this morning that rang so true. He said, like, I was intimidated playing football because football is an intimidating sport. It's a violent game. It, like, no matter what you do, how many rule changes you make, it's an inherently violent game.
Agreed.
You can make all these different rule changes. The injuries are still going up too. That's the crazy thing. They're trying to make the game safer. These guys are bigger, faster, stronger because each time, first of all, it's the most popular game in the country right now. You've got people all over the country that regardless are always going to go and try to play football. And they predicate themselves on how tough and how violent can I be? How physically tough can I be?
So this is also a big part of it too, right? By changing all of these rules, you're actually making defensive players, how do you say this, less effective tacklers.
1,000%.
Right?
How do you practice?
Now, how do you practice, right? And then in the game, how are you properly taking them down if you can't effectively hit them but this smaller strike zone?
Sure.
Right? And so now you have to think that player's worried about their family, they're worried about their job, they're worried about their money, they're worried about, injuring themselves.
Yes.
So now they're thinking about all these different things. And so a hesitant player is a dangerous player
Sure.
because they don't know what they're doing or what they should hit.
Sure.
Right? And so I think there's the aggression of the clash, and then there is the hesitancy that could be just as dangerous in many ways.
Yeah, no, listen, I totally agree with you. And at the end of the day, you can make all these changes. You got to err on the side of caution, though, because the NFL right now, I mean, they can do almost no wrong. The sport is so popular within the country. But I think if you keep legislating that physicality out of the game and you start creating a lesser product, that's some of the reason why people watch the game for the hits. If you're taking some of that out of the game, I do wonder if over time that NFL's like bulletproof shield, it does start, some of those bullets slowly start to make their way through the armor.